The Batman swings into the box office with wide release this weekend, beginning last night with Thursday previews. We've got some of those fresh numbers coming out just this morning. We're going to talk about that, talk about the projections for this film, some of the production budget and marketing budget values that we know of and that we can assume, and talk about how successful this picture may or may not be. Stay tuned. Let's get into it. Online. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good Friday afternoon. I hope everybody is having a great week. I'm going to be heading out shortly to just enjoy myself with a day off this evening and tomorrow. Going to go see a concert and might get around to seeing the Batman this weekend, might not. I'm not incredibly sure yet, but of course, this isn't a review or a reaction to the film. I'm not here to tell you that I think the film is great or terrible. I haven't seen it. I don't know. Like I said, I hopefully will get around to it shortly enough and be able to give you some feedback on that, but that is for another day. Today, we're here to talk about the business side of this film. And before we get into that, if you are like one of the 60 or 70% of folks out there watching this video right now that are not yet subscribed, I'd ask you to go ahead and take care of that today. We appreciate you being here. We always try to put Hollywood through the business and financial lens of reality here on Valiant Renegade. And please make sure you hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, do leave a comment before you check out today. I want to get your thoughts on what you think about Batman's performance at the box office will wind up being. Give me some thoughts on domestic figures, maybe some global international figures as well. It's your call. Let me know if you've seen the movie, if you haven't seen the movie, if you want to see the movie, or if you did see it, what did you think about it? Try to convince me to go at this point. I'm going to have to make some time, but for today, we're going to get into just the hard numbers of this because this is what is important with a film. Right, this is what determines if a film truly is successful. It's not just audience reaction, it's also financial performance, return on investment for these movie studios, in this case, Warner Brothers. So this is an article recently from CNBC, okay? And I thought this was a good precursor because this is going to lay a good foundation as we move into the numbers for everybody to put themselves in the right frame of mind to compare this film to all the previous big Batman films that we have had. And of course, there have been quite a few iterations of them over the years. Coming into the weekend, CNBC is saying Warner Brothers' The Batman is expected to exceed $100 million in sales. This is the domestic run. So $100 million in box office sales for the opening weekend. And debut north of $225 million globally. Now, when it comes to box office projections and box office estimates, a lot of people have a lot of different takes on this. A lot of this these days is driven by pre-sales. These are figures that 20, 30 years ago, heck, even 15 years ago, we really didn't have a whole lot of data on. 10 years ago, I could make the argument. And that is because, of course, these days, the majority of movie ticket pre-sales are done online. Places like Fandango or directly with the theaters at AMC or Marcus Theater, Cinemark, IMAX. We'll talk about IMAX because, of course, some of these Thursday preview figures that we're getting this morning are inclusive of the Tuesday and Wednesday night limited release in IMAX only theaters. So a very small portion. So Thursday night previews, Friday today is the official wide release of The Batman, but the Thursday preview figures are really not just Thursday, they're Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday lumped into that figure. So we're going to get to that in just a minute. Of course, this goes back and talks about some of the original Batman films from 1989 with Michael Keaton and Tim Burton, which I grew up with. I was about 10 years old at the time when that movie came out. Between 1989 and 2005, from the article, Batman films have averaged between 250 million and 400 million ticket sales at the global box office. Now, as a caveat, I want everybody to be aware of course, these figures are unadjusted for inflation. So if we were to go back and do inflationary adjustments on the 1989 era films, that first, let's at least take the first two with Tim Burton, Batman and Batman Returns with Michael Keaton. And if we were to adjust those up, of course, these global figures would be much higher than what we're seeing here. 2008's The Dark Knight was the first Batman film to generate more than $1 billion worldwide. Again, unadjusted for inflation, and even though the last 14 years or so since that movie came out, the inflation isn't nearly as much as if we went back to 1989. It certainly is something that will be taken into an account. And I will tell you that that will be my endeavor for the Sunday review of the Batman when I post that video, hopefully late Sunday morning, early Sunday afternoon, ahead of the Renegade Online live show at 5 o'clock Central Standard Time. But we'll hopefully have those figures for you then. So let's go down to this because there's a few key pieces here, and you can see right off the bat, the movie has already racked up $21.6 million. And this article goes into a few details. Quote, if anyone thought the success of Spider-Man No Way Home was an anomaly, then The Batman looks to show that success for movie theaters is indeed a trend, built on the appeal of blockbuster-style films, said Paul Durgar. I don't want to mangle his last name. We'll just call him Paul. Sorry, sir. Senior media analyst at ComScore. Now, ComScore is a name that we have referenced quite a few times here on Valiant Renegade. Of course, ComScore is something that's often cited by our friends over at Deadline Magazine, Anthony D'Alessandro, with his box office articles and coverage. We're going to talk about that in a minute as well. The COOF pandemic has fundamentally changed the box office as audiences outside of the 18 to 35 demographic have been slow to return. Again, We've talked about this for months. We can go back and watch those videos on that. I have my own feelings there, but back to the article. Franchise-based films, particularly those about comic book characters, have been some of the few to break through and generate significant gains at the box office. Batman has been a staple at the box since 1989 when Tim Burton brought the Caped Crusader to the big screen. Over the last 3 decades, 6 actors have taken on the dual role of Wayne and the Masked Vigilante. These films have collectively generated more than $4.5 billion globally in the last 33 years. A heck of a franchise, to be sure. And again, that is unadjusted for inflation. So let's move over to the next piece here. And that is, again, from Deadline. We have, as I mentioned, our friend Anthony D'Alessandro, which does great work at Deadline covering the box office. And it goes into a lot of the same thing you can see here. Flies to $21.6 million in box office previews. Now, you have to ask yourself, what does that really mean? Where does that fall in comparison to other films, at least especially around this same time? Well, if you've been following this channel, you know that we talked about things like Black Widow, we talked about Shang-Chi, we talked about The Eternals, Spider-Man, Ghostbusters, all this kind of stuff. Most of these films were clipping in Thursday previews of around $10 to $12 million. So $21.6 million in box office previews is nothing to shake a stick at. It's certainly something that can be, shouted from the rooftops. That's an excellent Thursday preview. But again, it comes with the caveat that does include Tuesday and Wednesday figures from the IMAX screenings. And I'm sure that amounted to at least a few $1 million worth of that 21.6. So perhaps the actual Thursday take, which we might not ever quite know exactly what it was, the ultimate Thursday take might be closer to maybe 15 or 16 million, I would expect. Still very admirable for Thursday night previews. But if we look here, the Batman has racked up $21.6 million between the special one Showtime only previews, largely on IMAX on Tuesday and Wednesday. The Batman rang up $4 million. Again, that's an approximation. So like I said, that takes us down to around that 16 range, which means Thursday shows after 3 p.m. did 17.6. Now, like I said, we'll never know exactly the figure. We're going to get close, and we'll use Deadline's figures for this at this point of 17.6. I have a feeling that IMAX probably did a little bit better than that because they are doing some variable pricing with this now with AMC, which houses some IMAX theaters as well. But this is going to have a very wide release. It's one of the widest releases that is going to have for a movie. I think it's even ahead of Spider-Man No Way Home by a couple of screens. But the Batman's Thursday previews are ahead of Justice League, which was $13 million, again, unadjusted for inflation. Wonder Woman, $11 million, but below The Dark Knight at $18.5. So there you go. They're pulling out the Tuesday and Wednesday figures right there that they're estimating at this point from IMAX. They're saying $4 million. I'm thinking it might actually be a little bit higher, maybe $5. But here we are with this is, it's coming in behind The Dark Knight. And again, that Dark Knight figure is unadjusted. So it is definitely underperforming The Dark Knight. If we were to adjust that figure up for inflation, we'd probably be closer to maybe 21, 22 million. Batman versus Superman at 27.7. But still, again, the Batman is healthy in is in healthy box office territory, and it comes at such a great pivotal time for theaters. It's largely been a year since the New York City and Los Angeles markets were able to reopen. And it just announced it's lifting their mask mandates and things like this. So this surely will help as well. NRG reported, this is from the article earlier this week, that those moviegoers who are very or somewhat comfortable attending the cinema reached a threshold of 80%. That's the first time that's happened in a very long time. That's the first time I think they've had since before the coup, just a point shy of the all-time high of 81% in July. So, I mean, again, we've gotten back to where we were. It's reaching those previous levels of record comfort. And again, of course, this is all within a margin of error. Of course, when they do these surveys, this is not a perfect science. Usually you have a margin of error of plus or minus 3%. So it could really be 83. It could really be 77, give or take, depending on what their margin of error is. Hopefully it's around 3. It could actually be 4 or 5. But usually they try to get those statistical data sets as tight as humanly possible. So let's actually look. Here we are with the numbers. Domestic box office at 21.6 million. Now, how does this compare to a recent endeavor of a superhero film that was very, very popular? Well, here we are with Spider-Man No Way Home. And I know you're thinking, wait, Valiant, you really can't compare Batman to Spider-Man No Way Home. It's kind of, I know, I get it. But just for the sake of financial data review, stick with me on this one, folks. And that is this. Spider-Man No Way Home, Spider-Man the character itself is the epitome of Marvel character, at least in terms of popularity and marketing. Batman is really the same thing for DC that Spider-Man is to Marvel. So we do have to give some relative, deference to that and compare them at least on par with each other from that perspective. But what I want to call your attention to, just to show you how successful compared to this movie Batman may or may not be, let's take a look at the actual figures that we had. If we go down here, you'll see right there on December 16th that I've got highlighted on the screen the Thursday preview figures for Spider-Man No Way Home, a whopping $50 million. That is a huge, huge haul. And again, the Batman's $21.6 million Thursday previews included, $4 to $5 million or so from IMAX. So if we get a true raw Thursday number for comparative sakes, we're in the $16 to $17 million range like they talked about in the article. So again, even if we throw that $4 to $5 million in and we include it, just take the $21.6 million at face value, right, for their Thursday previews. If we presume that the performance of the Batman, financially speaking, at the box office will be in the same trajectory as Spider-Man No Way Home, which wound up, including those previews for that weekend, if we go down to December 19th, right there, you can see $260 million, okay? So $260 million right there for that weekend. Now, is Batman going to get anywhere near that? No way. However, again, if we assume the same trajectory and that those Thursday previews represent roughly 42% of the performance of Spider-Man No Way Home, well, then we can at this point look at this and say, okay, the Batman should wind up somewhere in the range of about $110 million for the weekend. Very respectable opening weekend. However, of course, word of mouth is going to alter that trajectory, or at least will have the possibility of altering that trajectory. So if word of mouth is extraordinarily high and good for this movie, then it's going to overperform that $110 million estimate. If it's very bad, it could easily underperform it and see it fall just shy of $100 million. You notice that even with Box Office Pro out there, which is another website that we use frequently, and they're having some trouble right now, so unfortunately I'm unable to pull that website for some reason up on the screen. But if you follow Box Office Pro has been actually reducing their projections for the opening weekend of The Batman over the last several weeks. In fact, last week's updated projections had it down another 10%, taking it to around 130 million. And of course, as you can see here, and that was on the low end, as you can see here, we're not even considering $130 million at this point. Although, according to Deadline, they are saying that there is some $50 million worth of ticket pre-sales for this film going into this weekend. So that could bode very, very well if they get at least another 50 million to show up at the gate, which you would think the walk-up traffic typically should be better than the pre-sale traffic, or at least by a little bit. And that also seems to help confirm this $110 million figure that I have in my head. But again, if we start seeing a lot of people talk about that they didn't like it, or just people decide not to talk about it that much, certainly those projections could decline. And that's why part of this is such a difficult thing to do in terms of projections, because you really don't know what the audience reaction in general is going to be until the movie actually comes out for a few days and people react to it and respond to it and decide whether or not that's going to drive their Twitter traffic or their Facebook traffic or anything like that. So that is where we are at this point. But what is also important, and some of the things that we also talk about quite frequently on this channel, is how financially successful, or what is the propensity for financial success that this movie might have. So let's go back over here to the Batman and let's look at the summary. And according to the numbers, the information they have, and this is a 3-hour movie, folks, so that means fewer screenings can be made on the same screen than a typical 2-hour movie, just because of time issues, obviously. But if we look at this, the production budget on this movie is reported, at least as far as what data the numbers has, at $100 million. So that is a very cheap price tag, in my opinion, for a major superhero flick. And by that, I'm talking like Spider-Man, Batman, big Marvel, DC type stuff. $100 million is a very cheap price tag. So that's certainly going to help this film cross its profitability threshold much more quickly and efficiently than had they spent $200 million or 150 to 175 million like we see on a lot of Marvel films. $200 million for a Marvel film these days is pretty much standard fare. So Warner Brothers has done a good job on cost controls here. Now, of course, production budget is not the only thing that is on the line for these movie studios. There are distribution costs, right? That's global marketing or global print and advertising. I promise you, on a movie like this, there is at least another $100 million of marketing budget on the ground right now for this film, if not significantly more. It might approach, once all said and done after the next couple of weeks, it might approach $150 million or more. We just saw recently Spider-Man No Way Home with a $200 million production budget reportedly had a $225+ million marketing budget. And this is why when we talk about the profitability of Spider-Man No Way Home, even at almost $1.9 billion right now in global haul, they're probably still at this point looking at a $200 to $300 million profit at the end of the day. Of course, that is before they sell the film or license the film out to some place like Netflix or, on down the line, or sell PVOD, premium video on demand, sell DVDs and Blu-rays, digital, blah, 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 all that stuff. Okay, but as far as just straight box office, that's what we're looking at. So hopefully Warner Brothers has a lot less skin in the game, or at least in terms of production budget. We know they do. But in terms of a marketing budget, those are figures that are far less easily obtained. Let's put it that way. Deadline does a pretty good job of doing estimates. They have their own industry experts that work there that tell them based on the amount of ad buys they're seeing, based on the amount of online advertising they're seeing, they come up with some pretty good figures to estimate what a movie studio or distribution arm is spending on global marketing. So I would definitely say at the bare minimum, Warner Brothers has $200 million in the ground on this picture, which means that they probably need to be in a range somewhere around, I would say, $375 to $400 million at the box office before that they are really getting into profit territory with this. Easily. Because again, they're taking home about 50% or so average globally on a picture like this. They might be getting around 55% or so average from domestic box offices, that's US and Canada, but they're still getting only around 42 to 43% of international figures, not including China, which this movie is supposedly going to be opening in, I believe. I don't know. Let's see if they have set a date yet. I don't think an official date has been announced, but I do seem to remember reading recently that this movie had passed through the Chinese CCP censors and was approved for release in China. So when you go to China, you're going to walk home with about 25% of the box. So if the Batman goes over there and makes $100 million, it's going to walk home with about $25 million of that. So again, we have to take everything into account. Now, they supposedly have had a very good international start from only about a handful of markets, I think maybe 7 or 8 different markets. They pulled in about $5 or $6 million already just from opening previews. Very good figure, so we're going to see where this goes. And by Sunday morning, when we do a follow-up video on this, we'll have some additional information. So anyway, I hope this was all illuminating for everybody. We try to go into more details and deeper dive here on this channel to try to just impart some education to the folks watching out there, how this business really works and how these studios really make money. So again, hit that like and subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, do leave a comment before you check out today. I want to hear from you. Are you seeing this movie? Are you not? Are you impressed with the box office performance so far? Are you not? Where do you think we're going with this? Good to see everybody out there, and until next time, take care.